Udon's been putting out comics for each of the Mega Man series in the primary timeline, with several cover variants. One of the more notable types is the line exclusive to their website, which features graffiti, sprites, and, most significantly, some of the more prominent female characters from the different series, drawn up nice and pretty by Keenbiscuit. Not only are they very pleasing to the eye, but it's also pretty interesting to see who gets chosen to represent their games. Their hands are pretty tight on some of them, on others I can see what they were going for, and there's even one that I really disagree with. So why don't we go over the options available, who they chose, along with maybe why, and in one or two cases, who I might have chosen instead. I'm Wes the Explosion, and this week, it's all about the ladies. Or sometimes the lack of. The classic cover has Roll, Kalinka, Splash Woman, and Flum. 4 seems to be the target number with this set of variants, so they're pretty lucky that they didn't need more, since these are pretty much all the females Classic really has. If they did need more, there are a few other options, such as Honey Woman, who doesn't appear in any of the games, but did have concept art before they changed lanes and made her Hornet Man, and swapped Ocean Man for Splash Woman because I guess anything more than one female Robot Master in a game would have simply been too much. I kinda like both Honey and Hornet, and prefer Splash to Ocean, so I guess it's fine. Roll also has 3 different outfits, so they could have always doubled up on her with one of those if they were desperate enough. A part of me also says they could have brought in Quake Woman from the Archie comics since she was fairly well received and Capcom did retain the rights, but she's not game canon, and if we start tapping into adaptations, there would be no end to it. Ruby Spears, Fully Charged, Mr. Mega Man, Wish Upon a Star, to name a few, and that's just classic. That's also why I won't mention Bad Box Art's Roll from that Tekken crossover. So, as you can probably see, when it comes to girls in Mega Man Classic, them's pretty slim pickings. You have a few more choices for X, the mainline games getting Iris, Aelia, Lair, and Palette. You get Bracano on Game Boy Color, and X Command Mission has Nana, Marino, Cinnamon, Ferrum, and even some random NPCs in Giga City. There's also the recently named operators for Maverick Hunter X, Minerva and Luna. I recognize the one, and I think the other allegedly shows up in the background in Day of Sigma. And I guess I have to include the X-Dive original characters, even though I don't think it counts even a little towards the mainline stuff, but that's its own rant. Anyway, Rico, Aiko, Droid Claire, and Eratoire. Also kind of Iris Another. She's like Iris again, but kinda different, though not really, and listen, I like her, she can just be a little hard to categorize. From those, they picked Iris, Aelia, Cinnamon, and Rico. That represents the full series pretty well, Iris being the first female character introduced, and showing up in X4. Aelia appears in the most games, X5 through 8, and you could argue is the most well-known from this group. While X Command Mission is a spin-off, it does have the most female characters and is a pretty popular entry, so an inclusion from that is a smart move. While I would have gone with Marino or maybe Nana, Cinnamon is a playable character and part of the core group, so she's not a bad choice. Rico, though. Okay, I might do a full video on this at some point, but from my understanding, the X-Dive OCs do not exist in any universe with the cast of Mega Man X. Instead, the game takes place in your copy of the Legacy collections, and the established characters that show up are more copies or your memories of them, rather than their actual selves. As such, X-Dive feels more like its own separate thing rather than a Mega Man X title despite the name. So for probably the most conceited I'll sound this video, I don't think Rico should have made the cover. As for who I would have chosen, if we count Aelia more as the rep for the full series, I think we could have Lair or Palette show up for X8 specifically. Bracana could have been chosen to represent the handhelds, and given that Minerva appears in the actual comic, she would have also been a good pick. A part of me wants to just go with the big boobied girl, but considering that for Command Mission they went with Cinnamon rather than any of the other options with more prominent features, and peeking ahead a bit, it does look like they're avoiding anything too provocative to adorn the cover. Though really, when would this observation even be relevant other than X? This is allegedly a children's series. And that's not a complaint, I'm not saying that these should be cranked out as Gooner material, that's just how a lot of comics do try to get some extra sales. X-Dive 2, come to think of it. So let's go with Bracana instead. The witch has the special distinction of being a main villain, at least until it turns out it was Sigma all along, and it gives the extreme titles some love. Also, do you think the reason we never got a female Animal Maverick was because they didn't want to dip into furry territory? For Mega Man Zero, we have Ciel, Leviathan, Alouette, Neige, Rouge and Joan, various Resistance members including Rochinol and those cute redheads, and there's apparently at least one other woman in the caravan, Breeze. From them, the cover gets Ciel, Leviathan, Alouette, and Neige, which is pretty much perfect. These four are the most plot significant, Ciel being the main heroine, Leviathan a recurring boss, Alouette having an increasing importance as the games go on, and Neige moving a good bit of the plot in 04, as well as symbolizing a lot of that game's themes. The rest are mostly just NPCs, me having to dig a bit to even find the names for the two operators. But wait, there's more! And these exclusions do tell us a good bit about what they're looking for in these covers. There's also the Mother Elf / Dark Elf, the Baby Elves Kreia and Preya, and the various Cyber Elves in general. The Mother and Baby Elves are pretty indistinct, and while the rest do have pretty cute designs, none of the other Cyber Elves factor too heavily into the story, other than Passy, so I guess that's why they weren't included. Though it does seem like a bit of a waste not to include one or two as background elements. Though before you go thinking we're done, there's also two female stage bosses, Noble Mandrago and Soul Titanion. Between them and the elves, I think it's pretty clear that they're sticking with the more human-looking, traditionally cute characters. Add that to how they're using 4 female characters with either a good spread of which games they're from or just overall importance, and not being too alluring, and 3 in, I think we got the general criteria down. Not a bad way to make your pick. Anyway, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Cubit Foxstar, who has both an animalistic form and a humanoid one. The problem there is that they are not a woman. At least not always. In the original Japanese, they're just kind of an effeminate man, which I guess was too much for kids to be exposed to back when the game came out, so in English, they're a girl. Or, who knows, maybe it was an inclusion or mistranslation thing, but regardless, this inconsistency makes it pretty obvious why they didn't make it in. I say they because that just feels the safest. Now, I do not have the complete works for ZX to double check myself, but Ale, Ash, Prairie, Pandora, Atlas, and a bunch of random NPCs. If the wiki has them all, Arcia, Barbara, Cammy, Fiona, Karen, Luca, Lucia, Melody, Michelle, Sherry, Sylvia, Sonia, Talia, Gardenia, Tulip, Margaret, Cedre, Muget, Rose, Oilette, Shane, Platane, Amy, Anna, Carly, Elena, Mary, Meg, Nana, Sharon, Tina, Blossom, Janet, Nadia, Marina, Nina, and Tillis. Sweet Christmas, why do they all have to have names? If they didn't, I could have just left it at random NPCs. Also, we should probably include Model L too. For bosses, there's Laurel the Abyssroid, Hurricane the Wolveroid, Queen Bee the Hymenopteroid, and Headshock the Arenasaroid. Also leaning on the wiki for this because some of these genders are not what I thought they were, which might be another reason why the robo-animals weren't included. Throw out the random townsfolk as well, and that really only leaves us with the first 5 I mentioned. You need Ale and Ash since they're the main characters and one half of the face of their games. Pandora is a primary antagonist, so is Atlas and Advent, whereas Prairie not only kicks off the events of the games, but is also your primary support in the first title. If you had to kick out one of them, I'd say either Prairie, since she already was on one of these covers, just under a different name, or Atlas, since she's just a fraction of her bad guy squad. Maybe we could even bump her down to supporting villain. Yeah, I'd say ditch Atlas. And now there's 5 of them on the cover. Listen, it's fine, more characters is actually more fun and bang for your buck. I just feel a little betrayed since just 4 seem like the most obvious part of the formula. Also, I hate Atlas, really her entire friend group, they are just so insufferable. The worst thing about not getting more ZX games was that I never got the chance to permanently end them. But of the 4, Atlas is the most tolerable, so there is that, and her being here means that they did get every important female cast member, so my personal disdain aside, great job! My list for Legends is a little shaky. Not only is there not a complete works yet, we don't even have all the games, there being a lot of spin-offs that didn't make it over. There's also a lot of NPCs you only interact with once, and sometimes they have names, sometimes they don't. Cobbling this together from web pages in my own memory, we have Roll Casket, Tronbon, Amelia, Yuna, Sarah, Shu, Matilda, Maria and her daughter, Yoken, Ofuten, Yaito, Denise Marmalade, Roxette, Pearl, Maud, Arrow, and for a sampling of the one-off NPCs, Anna, Ira, Museum Curator, Junk Shop Woman, and Denise's Superior Officer. Sorry if your favorite is the woman at the front desk at Catalogs' TV station or something. The rest are just kinda there, staffing shops or wandering around, and while I've never counted, I do want to say that it's about even between male and females. And that kinda makes sense, most of the previous games are just gauntlets of levels and fights, but Legends is a more lived-in world, people going about their days, so the setting calls for a more standard mix of guys and gals, which is probably why this was the first series to really do this. ZX with its location did similarly, though by release date, Legends beat them to it. But who? Who should make the cover? Roll and Tron, obviously, then Sarah and Arrow. I picked out my guesses before I knew we were doing 5. As for who actually made it, Roll and Tron. Obviously. Sarah and Yuna, and Denise. Arrow was kinda the face for Legends 3, you voted on her design in the dev room and she was in a lot of promotional images. Given that Legends 3 got cancelled though, I could see characters from that being off limits. And while, had I known that, I might have went with Matilda over Yuna just because Yuna doesn't show up much in the game, at least not in that form, I think both characters are valid choices. Plus, it does give the cover some sense of symmetry, well, at least the back row. Denise though, I'm embarrassed I didn't consider since we've already established that these do bring in spin-offs. I don't know, maybe it was the lack of Mega Man in the title, the misadventures of Tronbon. Though of the supporting cast, I would say that Denise is the most important, her being kind of a rival to Tron, so good pick. While a part of me does want to argue harder for Arrow, I get why she isn't here and I think this is a pretty good selection based off of who was on the table. Well, assuming that lack of Arrow was because she was banned and not because they forgot about her. Battle Network does not have a Timelines comic, but it'd feel weird if we didn't include it, so Male Sakurai, Yai Ayano Koji, Miss Mari, Land's mother Haruka Hikari, Mad, Sal, Miyu, Rabita, Princess Pride, Miss Millions, Tamako Sherry Izumi, Aneta, Shuko Kido, Lily, Tesla Magnus, Jasmine, Iris, Yuka, Pat Farin, Ann Zapp, Mary Toa, and Charisse. Miss Mari also has a sister, Yuri, or Yuriko, who appears very briefly in the first game, but has a much bigger role and more unique character design in the anime, including a cross-fusion with Needleman. Those are just the humans though. For Navis, we got Roll, Ring, and Medi. And like with Legends, I ain't gonna go through all the unnamed NPCs, most of which just have reused character models. Sorry, sexy Jennifer. Also like Legends, when it comes to the physical world, there's a decent male-female ratio. While I wouldn't say it's 50-50, we're not struggling for female reps. A part of me did think that there were more of them, but I might have also thought that the cast was bigger as a whole due to them reusing characters, all the NPCs filling in the gaps in the world, and the anime having a bunch of folks exclusive to it. When it comes to Navis though, well, I mean most of them are based off of Robot Masters from Classic, so them not having many is to be expected. The 3 we see being the only female DLN, at least at the time, Roll, the original character Medi that was probably created just to give girls someone they could play as, and of course Ringman, but now a woman, but not Ring Woman, just Ring, so a dimensional gender swap. And hey, since there is a chance that Udon could do a Battle Network comic at some point, let me try to guess who'd be on the front if they got Keenbiscuit back. Let's split it between NetOps and Navis. Male and Roll are givens. Then I'd say probably Yai since she is in every game, one of the core characters. This gives her a second chance since she got passed over for Legends, and with her diminutive size, also fits the cute code. As for the other Navi, I'd go with Ring, since not only is that a spin-off inclusion, but her being a him in a different life is also pretty unique. And assuming that Keenbiscuit does another 5 and doesn't drop it back down to 4, or crank it up to a dozen just to throw me off again. Okay. This last one is going to be a spoiler, something that will not be obvious your first time playing, so skip to the next chapter if you aren't through the Legacy collections. Iris. Make the last one Iris, somewhere in the middle of the image. She's a Navi that you spend the bulk of BN6 thinking is a human due to how she's dressed and her use of a copybot, keeping her in the real world. That keeps the human Navi balance, plus as one of the only X characters to get an EXE adaptation, that's another element that makes her special. So there you go, this is the perfect lineup. Hopefully we get a chance to see if I called it. Let's continue the trend with Star Force. This one's a little weird since a lot of characters come in twos, a human and an EM life form that they fuse with. I don't think there's any examples of a cross-gender pairing, so I might mix up 1 or 2 of these, though I did try looking into most. Also, a lot of these wind up being bosses, so if you want to go into the upcoming Legacy collection not knowing which of the random denizens wind up being hostile, you might want to skip this part for now. With that warning out of the way, you have Hope Stellar, Luna Platts, Ophiuchus, Queen Ophiuchus, Vogue, Vale Platts, Sonia Strum, Lyra, Harpnote, Dr. Vega, Amy Galande, Queen Tia, Virgo, Queen Virgo, Belle, Ice, Diamond Ice, Heartless, Dr. Goodall, and Rich.com's attendants. Also, while not in the games due to dying before Star Force 1, Sonia's mother does appear in the official works, so she is canon. I would count her. And of course, there's an army of random NPCs to fill out the world. As for the 5 I'd pick, there's a bit of a stumbling block in trying to decide between the girls and their wave change forms. Ideally, rather than choosing between Sonia and Harpnote, we could maybe get a partial transformation right down the middle like Baron Ashura from Mazinger, but if we had to go one or the other, I'd say Harpnote. Then of course Luna Platz, as well as Dr. Vega, Queen Virgo, and Diamond Ice, though I could see Queen Ophiuchus being subbed out for that last one. That would be kinda doubling up on Luna, the title Queen, and I could also see that transformation dipping into sexy territory for some people, so she's a secondary guess. And if I were doing this as my personal wish list, I'd throw in Geo's hot mom. But she's not as front and center as some of the other girls, nor does she have some flashy transformation. Plus, she'd break the rule of being too sexy. Hopefully that's all of them, or at least close enough. Things started out with barely any options, just the minimum 4 for Classic, but later series do have more of a mixed cast. I think it was in part due to the games evolving to having more expansive worlds, as I mentioned, though it could have also been to grow Mega Man's audience. Video games were a pretty niche hobby back in the day, though now everyone plays. I wonder what a modern Mega Man games cast would look like. Still no more female robot masters, huh? Well, at least Roll got a new outfit in Nendoroid. There's also X-Dive, though given some of those outfits, I'm not sure I'd say attracting women to the franchise was the goal. Oh well, Star Force is coming next, which is one of the better ones for female representation. If you want to play as a girl though, you need the Misadventures of Tronbon, either ZX title, Battle Chip Challenge, or power it up with DLC, so good luck. But with that, we can start wrapping up. So, were there any major female roles that I missed? Are there any substitutions you would have made for the Timelines covers? And, just because I'm curious, if you are a girl who's a fan of Mega Man, what series got you into the franchise, and was female representation, or lack of, a factor? Thanks as always for watching, and maybe consider subscribing if you're into retro games, especially Mega Man. So, what do you think the odds are we get a female DWN for Dual Override?